This man is called Roberto Saviano. He's an Italian writer born in Naples. His best-selling book Gomorrah follows his infiltration into the Naples mafia, known as the Camorra. Gomorrah exposes how the Camorra are involved in several industries, such as Class A drugs, but also more legitimate enterprises like fashion, and the topic of this video, waste management. To say he got under fire for this book is an understatement, and, since its publication, he has lived with police protection due to threats to his life. Given this, you'd either have to be brave or stupid to dig into Camorra activity, especially so if you went to Naples yourself to get content for a YouTube video. The Romans knew this part of the world was special. They called this region Campania Felix, roughly meaning lucky or blessed countryside, due to the exceptionally fertile soil and beauty of the area. From the hills of Vesuvius to the Bay of Naples, the region is home to some of the most stunning landscapes in all of Italy. However, this region is scarred. The land has been destroyed throughout its history by both natural and man-made crises. Today's video is looking at how mankind's actions and inactions led to a 14-year-long crisis. This is the story of how Naples' most infamous residents took advantage of this land and poor governance to create a situation where the streets were full of society's offal, and we find not only sick people, but also poisoned animals and plants. This is the story of the Naples waste management crisis. The land which gives this region its beauty can also take it away in an instant. In the evening of Sunday, the 23rd of November 1980, the Irpini earthquake rocked the region of Campania. Magnitude 6.9 earthquake and subsequent aftershocks led to over 2,000 people dead and 250,000 displaced. The region was in ruin. Funds poured in from across Italy and the Western world to fund the rebuild, and local companies were given the role of helping rebuild the towns destroyed by the quake. However, as investigators began digging into the rubble, they found more than bodies and broken homes. The debris was found to be below building standards for that time, standards which should have stopped some of them collapsing or being as badly damaged as they were. Once this news seeped out, investigators had another issue. Despite army support, they were being threatened by the corporation which had helped build the subpar buildings and subsequently planned to further profit through the reconstruction process. These companies had been infiltrated over several years by members of the Neapolitan mafia, the Camorra. The Camorra is the collective name given to a series of secret societies within the general Campania area who partake in organised crime. It is unclear when the Camorra first formed. Many estimates say sometime around the 17th century, being brought over from Spain. The Camorra itself is split into different branches, known as clans, all of whom will operate in several aspects of illegal activity and in different areas of Campania. These clans operate largely independently of each other. Although these clans have often fought each other for territory, their pseudo-independence strengthens the Camorra overall, as taking out a single boss doesn't massively impact the whole organisation. The crisis included several of these clans, including notably the Malado clan. However, the clan most widely associated with the crisis is one of the most infamous and powerful in Camorra history. The Casalesi clan originated in the 1970s in Caserta, a region to the north of Naples. The clan was founded by Antonio Bardolino. He built Casalesi to become powerful and infamous even when compared to other Camorra clans. Bardolino ran Casalesi until he disappeared in 1988. The widely reported story is that he was murdered in his Brazilian villa by his right-hand man, Mario Ivone. Although it's impossible to ask Mario about this, as he too was murdered whilst using a Portuguese phone booth in 1991. With Bardolino MIA, Casalesi often experienced periods of hostility due to tensions between the new leaders, Francesco Sandokan Schiavone and Francesco Midnight Franti Beinonetti, who both ran clans within Casalesi. Other notable bosses within the clan included Michele Capastora Zagaria, who was both the muscles and the business acumen behind the clan. The final notable boss was Antonio O Nino Iovine, who is also known as the Minister of Garbage in Campania. The four of them made the Casalesi clan one of the most powerful in the Camorra. Although the clan were involved in traditional, mafia activity, including a fish and flour operation to smuggle cocaine from South America, the Casaliti clan preferred more mundane, low-profile practices, such as concrete and construction to earn revenue. The members have become experts at gaining influence in businesses either through intimidation, bribery, or infiltration. This could be seen through their winning of contracts in construction before and during the aftermath of the 1980 earthquake. With the increasing power and wealth from the booming world of 1980s organised crime and the boss's business acumen, the clan was seeping into more and more aspects of Neapolitan daily life. The influence of Camorra even seeped into politics. The local government had to be disbanded several times due to Camorra infiltration and eventually managed externally to keep distances from the clan. Casaliti were that well connected that even reportedly, using his brother, organised clan meetings in police station, snorting cocaine off officers' desks, and borrowed police cars for errands. So Campania in the south was on its knees, and many aspects of modern life and governance had been infiltrated by the Camorra in some form. The south of Italy was also significantly poorer than the northern regions, which housed cities such as Milan, Turin, and Genoa. In the north of Italy, the 1980s looked a bit different. Northern Italy was in boom in the mid to late 1980s. 1988 saw the end of the 20 years of lead, where there was widespread political and social turmoil, as well as numerous incidents of terrorism in northern regions. Furthermore, economic reforms, including the Italian lira joining the European monetary system in 1979, a precursor to the euro, as well as the independence of the Bank of Italia in 1981, stabilised the economy, reducing inflation. The reduction in inflation and the economic reforms led to an export-led boom in the Italian economy. The economic upswing was led by a rise in small and medium-priced enterprises exporting to the rest of the Western world. The economy grew and grew. Italian GDP overtook the UK in an event known as Il Sorpasso. However, alongside the flash cars and fancy clothes, economic growth has one dirty side effect. Every economy takes raw materials and, using the factors of production, turns them into an output. However, this process isn't perfect and often, alongside the finished product, an element of waste is produced which serves no further purpose to the business or consumers. Given 56 million people lived in Italy in 1980, there was a lot of waste and, more importantly, a lot of money to be made. The global waste management industry was worth $1.6 trillion in 2020 and is set to rise to over $2.4 trillion by 2030. The value represents the fact that everyone produces waste, but few want to handle it. To stop streets and towns becoming buried in trash, generally, governments either run their own waste disposal operations or, in the case of Campania, put out contracts which are subsequently bid on by companies to find those willing to dispose of society's garbage. However, it is not as simple as putting everything everyone doesn't want into the bin. Not all waste is equal. There are three categories of waste: special, urban, and toxic. Northern Italy is home to several large companies who produce toxic waste such as heavy metals, chemicals, and harmful dust, which have the potential to cause massive damage to the environment. Seeing the dangers and potential for market failure that such waste could have to wider society, governments have often introduced legislation and charges to those who pollute. This is commonly referred to as the polluter pays principle. The polluter pays principle means that, where possible, the cost of pollution should be borne by those causing it, rather than the person who suffers the effect of the resulting environmental damage or the wider community. The theory behind polluter pays is that the increasing cost of disposal for hazardous waste will push these companies to use more environmentally friendly practices, so that the impact on profits will be minimised. This also reflects the additional cost to waste companies to dispose of hazardous waste safely, compared to domestic waste. So this would mean businesses, such as Northern Italian industry, will need to pay additional fees for disposing of toxic waste. However, there's two issues here. Firstly, the economy of Italy is massive. In 2021, there are over 6 million registered businesses in the country. It would therefore be impossible for the police and government to know everyone who is disposing and everything they are disposing of. The responsibility of performing due diligence is placed upon waste management companies for the goods they are transporting, dumping, or destroying, and subsequent checks are performed on these companies by authorities to ensure they are operating legally and ethically. However, the second issue is that by the late 80s, early 90s, as we've already established, there were strong mafia influences in organisations and industries across Italy. The waste management industry was no exception. At the peak of their involvement, there were 18 waste management companies throughout Naples. 15 had links to the Camorra. The links to these companies, as well as local government, meant by 1994, the Camorra effectively had control of the entire waste trade in Campania. So, we have a situation where there is a wealth divide between the rich north and poorer south, and an industry with large potential gains which is controlled by organised crime, where the only fail-safes to prevent abuse are owners of warehouses and landfills. This gave the Camorra an idea. They weren't interested in simply being garbage men. They wanted to control every aspect of the waste cycle and profit at each stage. They would open their doors to receive business from northern firms, with a USP of both better service and lower costs. Camorra-connected waste companies approached businesses using middlemen who Saviano referred to as stakes. Stakes were intermediaries who gave the impression of being legitimate, highly educated, groomed and well-spoken dealers who would connect businesses to Camorra waste management companies. Stakes offered businesses a full waste disposal service, pickup, disposal and all transportation costs included. All of this while significantly undercutting the competition. You're probably wondering how they could so dramatically undercut legitimate firms when dealing with dangerous or hazardous waste. You see, the mafia are experts at making things disappear. People, money, drug laws. Why not make waste regulations disappear and keep the profits? The key was the paperwork. The trust placed in those checking waste was a weak link in the chain, and operators of warehouses or landfills had the power to change codes or mix the waste with chemicals so it passed any safety test. What mattered most was the formal documentation that supposedly verifies safe disposal. Through persuasion or financial incentives, toxic waste could be marked safe or combined with less hazardous waste. With a simple stroke of a pen, any waste can be classified as being appropriately dealt with. For example, harmful chemicals can be classified as fertiliser, mixed with safer chemicals and smuggled as compost. Originally, all waste, regardless of condition or risk level, were combined with domestic waste and dumped into a landfill. However, due to the popularity of their full service guarantee at rock-bottom prices, they needed alternative dumps. Officially taken to landfill, waste soon found itself in illegal dumping grounds in the Campanian countryside. The whole process, legally, was legitimate. Politicians even got in on the act. As revealed in the Tangentopoli investigation, politicians received kickbacks in the forms of vote or cash for authorising illegal dumping. Using this creative method of disposal, some of the undercuts were astronomical. The market prices for disposal of waste ranged from 21 to 62 euro cents a kilo. Clan services were available for around 9 or 10 cents a kilo, greater than half the cost. The offer was tempting enough that a reported 440 businesses took up the offer, without looking more critically at the plan. So the rewards were high, whereas the risks seemed minimal. Italian law regarding waste dumping at the time were lax at best. Many escaped with slaps on the wrist, and the statute of limitation for such crimes were low. Most environmental law efforts were focused on waste being dumped across borders. Internal, large-scale waste dumping seemed counterintuitive. Many people would logically be unwilling to pollute in their own area, but, in the words of Saviano, bosses tend not to be concerned with the long term. The main area infected with dumps were the Naples and Caserta regions. However, waste was scattered across Campania. The illegal waste management industry is one of the most innovative markets out there, with several methods at their disposal. This includes burying the waste in natural caves, combining the hazardous waste with household waste and sending it to landfill, leaving the hazardous waste in areas undergoing decontamination, such as near Vesuvius, spreading the waste onto farmland under the pretense of being fertiliser, adding the waste to building materials such as cement, or diluting the waste into the water and sewage systems. An artist looks at a blank space and wonders what they can create. A waste clansman looks at what has been created and wonders what blank spaces they can fill. Any abandoned quarries, fill it up. Pour some of that toner and dust into concrete, make bricks to build houses no one will ever know. Reportedly, they would even put waste in a boat, sail it out to sea, sink it, and then get paid twice, once by the business for disposing of their waste, as well as claim on the insurance for the loss of the boat. The operation was successfully camouflaged due to the paperwork and corruption of officials. That was until a particularly gruesome incident raised police ears and was a timely reminder to those partaking in the illegal waste dumping industry the severity of the materials being disposed of. 4th of February 1991, Mario Tamburino, an Italian-Argentine clansman, became most famous for a single incident. That evening he was tasked with driving a truck hauling 571 barrels of toxic waste from Piedmont to the outskirts of Naples. When he reached his destination, he then set about moving the waste himself. It was during this removal that one of the barrels leaked. The contents of the barrel subsequently contacted his eyes. The waste he was transporting was volatile enough to cause permanent, instantaneous respiratory damage. The fumes damaged his hands with a dry burn and his eyes swelled into a shape resembling egg yolks, eyelids stuck open. When he arrived at the hospital, he remained tight-lipped about what had conspired. He was marked down as suffering from an unknown poisoning, but given the severity of the incident, legal ears perked up. After this incident, police caught on to the activity and truck drivers became extremely hesitant to touch the barrels, with many insisting they had towed in trails behind the truck to further avoid contamination. Despite the risks, the trucks kept coming. Every week, 40 tractor trailers filled with waste left the north and headed south. With drivers unwilling to do the manual labour, the local youths were recruited from the restaurants of the area, given a deal which to them was too good to be true. Wait for a truck to arrive at a landfill or whatever space had been found for dumping. Move a few barrels and get €250. The youths, often adults, will be more aware of the inherent risk of moving these toxic containers. One inhale of the fumes from some of these barrels will be enough for hospitalisation and likely future cancer. The young men are either unaware or do not grasp the severity of the goods being transported. Farmers, whose land was becoming contaminated by the toxins, were forced into selling and many became lookouts for the clan. The stakes soon had customers queuing up from across Europe to dispose of hazardous waste in Campania. Metal waste from Spain, needles from Germany, le asbestos from France, all brought to Campania and, on paper, disposed of. However, with their priorities set on their new northern and beyond customers, the regular people of Campania were put on the back burner. This is a problem as even minor divergences from normal waste collection can lead to a crisis in the region. The Naples region has a very high population density, but at the time, relatively poor recycling and waste management infrastructure. Investing in a solution isn't going to be cheap either, as the Naples metro area is home to around 4 million people, which makes land come at a premium. With less appetite to use what land is available for landfill, this makes a crisis very easy to create in the region if waste is not consistently collected effectively. By 1994, a crisis was indeed building in Naples. Seeing the waste pile up in the streets and the situation worsening, Italian Prime Minister Carlo Azeglio Ciampi declared a state of emergency in the Campania region. They planned to tackle the crisis by taking landfills into public ownership where they originally were privately owned. Despite legally losing the landfill, the Camorra countered this by buying out small landowners on the cheap using intimidation before dumping on their new real estate. The crisis and dumping led to the Italian environmental group Legambiente coining the term eco-mafia to describe criminal activity done by organised crime which negatively impacts the environment. Legambiente then became dedicated to fighting the eco-mafia through spreading awareness through a yearly report which is ongoing to this day. Following a 2-year investigation, by 1996, the Carabinieri were convinced that the mafia were the culprits. But this did not stop the trash flow. Despite police inspections, truck after truck kept arriving in Campania. The bureaucratic muscles were working hard to alleviate the issue. Roughly 1.9 million tonnes of refuse went missing between 1999 and 2007, probably still in Campania in unofficial storage. Another thing disappearing were the landfills themselves. Due to the cost of land, during the crisis there were actually moves to shut landfills in Campania, decreasing from 62 in 2000 to just 3 officially in 2008. With landfills looking less appealing, but waste arrivals increasing, in 1997 it was recommended that the next steps would be to improve recycling facilities in the area. With the world becoming more aware of the environmental damage of mankind and the recommendation to improve recycling, the solution was obvious. At first glance, burning was seen to solve the waste crisis. Pile the waste up and burn it so it's gone forever, rather than decaying for decades in landfill. However, pushing through an official incinerator took decades due to protests. Unofficially, the Camorra were happy to introduce incineration into their portfolio. Bundles of waste were piled into fields and set alight using videotape as fuse. The smoke filled the air and acid rain descended upon the residents. The large amount of waste being burnt between Naples and Caserta led to the stretch of land to be nicknamed as the Land of Fire. As the crisis intensified, the clan saw revenue from waste rise and rise, exceeding the billions. By the late 1990s, the Camorra clans had become the European leaders in waste disposal. Between 1990 and 2005, it is estimated that Camorra trafficked 14 million tonnes of refuse, earning €44 billion in profit. In 2003, 6,500 tonnes of refuse arrived just from Lombardy to a seaside town in Caserta in just 40 days. The south had become the dumping ground of the north. The rewards on offer meant the feuding Sandakan and Bedognetti clans agreed to share the market and avoided head-on conflicts in order to maintain business. Waste management became so lucrative that it soon became the second highest income earner for the Camorra, only behind cocaine. With the scheme growing larger and larger, it was only a matter of time before the media would pick up on the story. In 2004, an article in The Lancet made international headlines. The article reported on cancer cases in an area between the towns of Acerra, Nolle and Marigliano, naming the area as the Triangle of Death. The triangle housed the largest illegal dump in Europe at the height of the crisis. Alongside simple burial and burning of waste, there was also the spreading of industrial waste chemicals sprayed on the land under the guise of being fertilizer. The soil, which the Romans adored, had become toxic. The ground here had been contaminated beyond repair and was no longer suitable for agriculture or any other uses. The events in the triangle angered locals and made news worldwide. Likely the catchline of the Triangle of Death led to greater public attention to the crisis. Adding to the media attention, in 2006, Roberto Saviano released his best-selling book Camorra, which covers Camorra activity as well as puts a spotlight on the clan's involvement in the waste crisis. The spotlight on the crisis, as well as a growing frustration with the government to deal with the emergency, further incensed the public, who saw their homeland being destroyed for profit. Worst of all, people's health and livelihood would begin to be affected. Scientists and researchers long hoped to establish a causal link between the illegal dumping and various health conditions experienced in those who lived in proximity to dumping grounds. This proved problematic for three reasons. 1. Due to the nature of diseases like cancer, which take years to develop, it was difficult to establish a causal relationship. 2. The large population living conditions meant other cancer-causing activities, such as air pollution or smoking, could not be factored out in the diagnosis. 3. Due to the illegal dumps being secretive and off the books, accurate locations of polluted sites were difficult to identify. Additionally, this makes it difficult to measure the amount of time individuals were exposed to the dumps. A survey of Campania between 1996 and 2008 found 2,551 contaminated areas, including 1,186 in the province of Naples, or roughly 1 per square kilometre. As mapping of illegal sites have improved, as well as comparing with hospitalisation data given decades have passed, leads to the following. The rates of leukemia, liver cancer and birth defects were all higher in polluted areas. Dumping was causal in a significant increase in cancer mortality in men and women in the provinces of Naples and in men in Caserta. In particular, several studies showed liver, kidney and bladder cancer mortality rising in affected areas. And it wasn't just humans becoming poorly. Local frogs had DNA damage.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay!
Ultrastructural abnormalities were found in moss collected in Acerta, and mozzarella produced from the region's buffalo were found to be contaminated with dioxins. As time goes on, there will be additional reports and journals discussing the impact dumping has had on the life in Campania. Overall, I think what we've learned here is that polluting the local area with toxic waste is not beneficial to local people or animals' health. Despite the publication of Camorra effectively telling everyone how and what they are doing, and new research showing the effects of the dumping, the Camorra only increased their activity. The burning and dumping of waste intensified year by year, peaking in 2007-08. By December 2007, the local landfills had become so crammed that waste collection effectively ceased. Without landfill or recycling, incineration was the only viable option. But the backlog of garbage awaiting burning was estimated to take 56 years to clear. With nowhere else to go, the city of Naples became the new dump. The streets became full of waste, both domestic and industrial. After years of mismanagement and seeing their family members become ill and waste filling the streets, the people of Campania had had enough and began to protest. They were seeking more permanent solutions to the crisis and put pressure on the government for change. Proposals for new landfills and incinerators were met with violent protests. Many were beginning to question whether this wasn't just the fault of organised crime, but an example of government failure. The EU, seeing the situation unfolding, put further pressure on Campania and Italy. European Commissioner for the Environment, Stavros Dimas, effectively called out the government for scapegoating the mafia for the crisis, stating,
"Frequently cited speculations around the role of organised crime should not be used to hide the fact that the more direct cause for the waste crisis appears to be the lack of action and the lack of political will to adopt measures necessary for solving the waste management problem."
The EU threatened a ban on mozzarella exports after the traces of dioxins were found in the cheese. This would have crippled the Campanian economy, as the industry employed around 20,000 people at the time. Waste piling up in the streets, burning and dumping increasing year on year, people becoming sick, and their livelihoods being threatened, it was no surprise protests were turning violent. Something needed to be done to save the health of Campanians, which coincidentally came about because of a hospital. In 2008, the Italian Justice Minister Clemente Mastella offered his resignation after his wife, Alessandra Leonarda, who led the Campanian Council, was placed under house arrest after allegations of corruption against herself regarding the state hospital. At the time, Italy was run by a narrow-margin coalition. Given that Mastella was the leader of the UDEAR party, his resignation triggered a vote of confidence in the incumbent Prime Minister Romano Prodi, which he subsequently lost. This is what's known as the 2008 Italian government crisis, not to be mistaken with the 2019 Italian government crisis, or the 2021 Italian government crisis, or the 2022 Italian government crisis, or the 2023 Italian. This week's government crisis triggered the Italian general election of April 2008. With people unhappy, it's not surprising that the voters of Italy elected a populist. The winner of this election was the Forza Italia leader AC Milanona and Bunga Bunga enthusiast Silvio Berlusconi. Berlusconi came in guns blazing to beat the crisis and clear the streets. Using the state of emergency, he introduced sweeping changes intended to end the crisis. He launched Operazione Strade Pulite, or Operation Clean Roads, sending in the army to help clean the streets. 170,000 tons of waste were sent to landfill, and an incinerator was opened in Nocera, leading to widespread disapproval and protest. He countered the unrest by making any protest blocking landfills illegal. The much opposed incinerator was also pushed through, opening in Nocera in 2009. By the end of 2008, Berlusconi proudly proclaimed that the crisis was over as the streets of Naples were clean. The state of emergency was lifted and responsibility for waste management was handed back to local authorities. By 2010, 600 tons of waste were in Neapolitan streets. The waste not on the streets were piling up for incineration, and the European Commission stated no progress had been made since 2008. Despite big sweeping statements and cleaning the streets, the root cause of the crisis was still not being addressed. The issue was more complex than simply move the garbage. Besides dealing with the garbage on the streets, you had to tackle the corruption in the industry, poor management, and poor recycling usage. More evidently than ever, reform was needed. With the crisis re-emerging, the people of Naples would go to the polls to elect a new mayor in 2011. The winner was a former prosecutor and MEP for southern Italy, Naples-born Luigi De Magistris. De Magistris set to work doing what he had done throughout his career in politics, defeating corruption. Rather than making big statements like Berlusconi, implementing temporary solutions through emergency powers, De Magistris sought reform. Contracts were taken from private waste contractors and waste management was remunicipalised. To help clear the backlog, waste was exported to the Netherlands. From July to November 2011, the waste in the streets fell from 2,500 tonnes to zero. Furthermore, he encouraged community projects, more specifically a greater emphasis on infrastructure for recycling, taking pressure away from landfills. Ongoing with this and the crisis in general was the criminal investigation into the Casalisi clan. In July 1998, the so-called Spartacus trials began, where several highly ranking Casalisi clan members were put on trial for their involvement in a range of criminal activities, which also included eco-mafiaism. Sandokan, Zagaria, and Iovine were added to Italy's most wanted list in 93, 95, and 96 respectively. Bidocnetti wasn't on the list, as he was the first to be arrested in 1993. Sandokan followed him. He had been arrested previously but released in 1993 on a technicality. Before he could be put under surveillance, he disappeared. He was found in a villa near Naples where he reportedly hid behind a sliding granite door. The Spartacus trial lasted for 10 years, and one of the chief witnesses against Castellisi was Sandokan's cousin Carmine, who had turned into a pentito. The trial resulted in all defendants being found guilty, either in person or in absentia. Iovine was arrested in Casa di Principe in November 2010 after attempting to flee the police who were surrounding him. Michele Gazzaria was the last piece to be cornered in December 2011. He was found in an underground bunker consisting of 5-metre thick concrete. 150 officers took part in the raid. Upon his capture, he reportedly uttered the words, "You've won. The state has won." Since the arrest of the Big Four of the Castellisi clan and the election of De Magistris, although waste dumping still occurs, the levels have fallen drastically. Following an integrated waste disposal plan, Campania is trending towards greater recycling, experiencing a 24.9% increase in the amount of urban waste being recycled from 2009 to 2020. This has likely been helped by intervention by the EU. In 2015, the European Court of Justice had grown tired of the incompetency of the Italian government in managing the crisis. They levied a fine of €120,000 a day for failing to meet the European Waste Directive. Carabinieri drones have patrolled the land of fire since 2013 to spot potential illegal fires and dumping. Systematic testing of the region's ground, water and animal produce is also ongoing. Alongside the work done to minimise new waste, there's efforts to repair the damage done by the crisis. Work is continuously being done to map polluted sites which are subsequently marked for decontamination. It has been found that 37% of the inhabitants of the Naples and Caserta regions live within 100 metres of a contaminated site. The illegal waste industry had reportedly been responsible for dumping 10 million tonnes of waste in the Naples and Caserta region from 1993 to 2013. It is hoped the mapping can help establish causality as well as guide healthcare to help screen victims. Going forward to present year, 2023 has seen the EU reduce a number of new laws regarding waste management, including a bill which ensured trash is not exported to countries which are unable to process said waste. The aim of agreements such as this is to increase accountability to nations to essentially clean up their own mess. In their 2023 Eco-Mafia report, Legambiente reported that, in Italy, although environmental crimes were up, offences related to the waste cycle fell and the number of people reported fell by 33.8% and 41% respectively. Given the trends in waste management and the Western world moving to a greener economy, it is hoped that a similar situation is unlikely to occur for the foreseeable future. Campania was simply a perfect storm, which led to the crisis spiralling out of control. I will leave the decision on who is ultimately to blame for the crisis up to yourself. Maybe you feel it is the mafia for the dumping, corrupt politicians and officials for taking over a decade to take decisive action, or the 440 companies who both created the waste and then failed to see the offer was too good to be true. Maybe it's a mix of all three. With one of their biggest earners seemingly lost, you may worry for the future of the mafia. Don't be. They're a progressive company who diversified so will continue to remain profitable going forward. 2023 has seen reports of the clans running the tin tomatoes and olive oil industry in Italy. And, even if it all goes wrong tomorrow and the Italian restaurants shut down, they can always rely on everyone's favourite stimulant, as cocaine is on its way back.